Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. It's time to get the garden ready. Today on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we will show you how you can build an easy access garden bed. I'll then show you the importance of hardening off your transplants. Then we turn our attention to warm season crops as we look at eggplant. Jim Shrefler is talking watermelon. And finally, we can't ignore those pests that sometimes find our garden. We are here once again in our backyard concept with another raised bed design, and joining us again is Steve Upson with the Noble Research Institute. And Steve, thanks again for coming and sharing another idea with us.
You're welcome.
We know you're a fan of tires, but this is a different take on it. So tell us about the pros and cons of this particular design.
Okay, we refer to this as the easy access garden bed. Easy access because it is easy in terms of accessing. We're looking at waist high, so it's a raised bed, right?
Perfect, yeah. No bending.
That's the idea. This is the highest profile bed that we have. No bending, okay, for adults.
And it provides a lot of planting area, more so than some of the others.
Yeah, this has the largest surface area, planting area, and it's 40 inches wide, which is wider than most of the other beds. It also incorporates a little more soil depth, a little bit more opportunity to grow a myriad of different crops, and instead of having a multiple, maybe say the modular type beds, sometimes this one bed will satisfy an entire, family. It does take a little longer to construct.
Yeah, this isn't something that you would make and take and move it. You're going to build this in place, right?
Right, it'll be in place. It sets on the semi tires, like you can see here. We have 6 tires. You can put other combinations together and make it as long as possible, but from a logistics standpoint and just making it feasible, we found that this arrangement, 3 stacks of 2, works really well for most backyards.
And the semi-tire just makes it larger. Could you still use the regular
You can.
vehicle tires?
It's a little bit less sturdy. These tires are extremely sturdy. They're built, of course, stronger for trucks. They're a little more difficult to work with, so you want to make sure that you have plenty of time and take your time to do it, because it does take a little bit more time to put together. But once it's together, it doesn't move. This is a very heavy bed.
So we've got our stacks of tires. Tell us a little bit about that interface of the soil and the tires.
Okay, so we have the liner here is just corrugated roofing tin. It actually bends up underneath and lays on top of the upper tire. The tires support the whole structure, obviously. And then we have a crack in between both sides.
Okay.
And that allows the roots to grow down through the actual container here into the soil that we use to fill the bed, the tires.
So there is soil in each of these tires.
There's soil
Okay.
in the tires. It's just regular garden soil. And what we prefer up top here is a more of a potting type of soil.
Okay.
But it is heavy enough that you could put a good sandy loam soil and then amend that with potting soil if you'd like, because it can withstand the weight.
So what about the ends? Because obviously the sheet metal doesn't curve up on the ends.
You could turn the sheet metal up on its end so it would conform to the shape of the bed, the tire. But in this case, to make it look more attractive, we've just lined it with treated 2x, and it makes it look, like I said, a little nicer. It solves the problem of trying to hook the metal arranged it that way. You stain the wood, and then of course we try to treat this metal. We'll put some coating on the inside to keep it from rusting this quick.
Okay, and then we've got our wood stakes here simply to help provide more support for any accessories we do on top.
Right. It's all the wood is part of the frame, and then we've got these little pipe here to accept any bows or, like you said, any trellis type of arrangement, attachment, accessory you want to build on top of the bed.
All right, so we got again a nice low frame here for season extension, but as some of your other beds have shown, we can do trellises just simply by changing this out.
Right, yeah, and you can customize them any way you want to. You could put a little different size of pipe here if you wanted to go with a little smaller pipe for a trellis, like we have on some of the other beds, but this is the design we came up for this particular little mini micro tunnel or hoop house on top of this bed.
All right, well, it looks like a really nice addition, something that you could easily kind of incorporate to kind of be a fence, you know, on a deck or something that you could harvest from as well. So
I think this is one of our more attractive beds. And another nice thing about it, Casey, is that because of the indentation between the tires, you can actually put your foot up under the bed, and it takes some of the weight off of your back. So I guess if you say this is ergonomically correct position to be working with, instead of bending your back, you put your leg here, and that way you don't have to bend over as much. So this is one, I think, my wife's favorite bed. I keep bringing her up in a lot of this because I bounce a lot of ideas off her. She tells me if I'm sane or not.
Well, that means it's tried and true. So thank you for sharing this idea with us, Steve.
You are very welcome. It's been fun.
This is the time we all get antsy to start putting our tomatoes and peppers out in the garden. You want to hold off, really, depending on where you are in the state of Oklahoma, until about mid-April. Of course, southern Oklahoma is going to get warmer faster than northern Oklahoma, so you may be able to plant a little bit sooner in the month of April. Really, the best thing to do, though, is check your weather forecast, your 10-day forecast, and see what the forecast is predicting as far as warm weather or cooler fronts moving in still. Because our warm season crops will not like cooler temperatures. So be patient, it's definitely going to pay off. However, there is something that you can do with your transplants. If you've been growing them, you can see we have peppers that are ready to get out into the garden, but we're not going to plant them just yet. First of all, we want to do what's called hardening them off, and that is basically pushing our babies out of the nest, in essence. Here in the greenhouse, they've been receiving the ideal conditions. You can see there's no wind in here. They're getting plenty of sunlight. They've been getting watered regularly, and so they've been just growing great, which is what you want to provide for new transplants and also to get those seedlings germinated. We want to give them the best care to get them off to the proper start. However, when we plant them out in the garden, they're going to be exposed to all new sorts of environments. So we want to go ahead and start transitioning them, acclimating them to those environmental factors that they're going to experience. And so the best way to do that is go ahead and take them outside just for a few hours. So you can see here I've got a garden cart that I'm just going to load up our transplants and just take them outside so that they can start to experience what life is going to be like once they're moved outdoors. When you move your transplants outdoors, you don't necessarily want to put them in full sun. Even though they might have been growing under a grow light inside or even in the greenhouse, what they're going to experience outdoors in partial sun is going to be about equivalent because they're not used to the intense, bright, full sun of the afternoon. So early morning, put them out for a few hours or a few hours in the afternoon, and each day sort of expand that range that they're outdoors in order to acclimate them and get them used to the brighter sun. The other thing is you can slowly take them further and further out of the shady area and put them in more sun as well. So to start off, you might find a shady tree. Even a deciduous tree that's lost its leaves is going to provide some of that dappled shade. Perhaps a covered porch or a patio would also work as well. Now, the other thing you're going to notice about these plants is they're already starting to experience some of those Oklahoma winds that are kind of brushing their vegetation. and that's going to actually dry them out faster than maybe what they were in their previous location. So we do want to make sure that we're still checking them for moisture. However, you know, letting them be a little bit thirsty, not to the point of wilting, but allowing them to experience that thirst just a little bit is going to get them used to the outdoor environment. Because again, once you plant them out into the garden, they're going to have a lot more soil to grow into that you're going to have to monitor. So having them in a cart like this allows you to kind of monitor them more closely before you plant them in the garden. Now I'm going to kind of spread these out a little bit so that they experience a little more of that wind, but I'm going to leave them on this cart so that I can simply roll them back indoors when I need to. You want to make sure to check the weather. If the temperature is going to be mild that evening, you might go ahead and leave them outside, because not only do we need to get them used to the sunlight, but they still might experience some cooler nights. Now we want to make sure that they're not too cold. If the temperature does get into the 40s or 50s, you might want to go ahead and bring them back in for that evening. Another thing that you can do to kind of get them ready for those Oklahoma winds is you can actually put an oscillating fan on them. So occasionally that will go past them, causing them to have disturbance, and again, kind of build up that strength and prepare them for our outside winds. So all of this again is just kicking those little babies out of the nest, preparing them for that full sun garden location where they're going to be exposed to more winds and also bright sunlight. This process is called hardening off, and you want to do this about a week or two before you plant your vegetable garden. If you haven't tried planting eggplant in the garden, it's a fun plant to plant, so I'd highly suggest it. It is in the family with tomatoes and peppers, so you want to make sure to rotate it and put it in a different location than where maybe you've had those previously planted. Now, we've featured eggplant on Oklahoma Gardening before, and a lot of times when people think of eggplant, they think of those large, deep purple fruit. However, we have a white eggplant, and like I said, we've actually even featured the white one, a Japanese variety before. But today we're featuring a new selection that was an All-America winner for 2022, and this is known as Icicle. Now, eggplant originally got its name because of the white fruit that looks like eggs hanging on a plant, but this Icicle variety is going to be a little bit longer and more cylindrical than some of the smaller, rounder white eggplants that you might have grown previously. Now, this particular variety does not sacrifice the taste or the texture, so you're still going to get that same great taste and texture, but it also is not have as many spines on it. So when you're harvesting, it's not going to be as painful to get in there and get those fruit. Now, Icicle will get tall. It'll get about 48 inches tall, and so you might want to provide it with a little bit of support, because as it gets more of those fruits on there, it's going to get a heavier. And of course, we know in Oklahoma we have some really strong winds. Now, the height on this is a little deceiving because of our raised bed here, but actually our soil sunk down. And so it's growing a little bit further, probably about a foot down than what it appears as the top of this bed. But actually that kind of just supports it along the sides of the bed there. So we've got a rather tall plant here, and you can see we've got several different fruits that are growing in here. We've got two plants. We've got another one back here that has several long ones that are starting to develop as well. They have these nice purple flowers that kind of look like what you might find in the Solanaceae family. These are purple, that kind of remind you of maybe the nettle that you see out in the wild. But again, this one is the edible eggplant. So when you harvest this, you want to make sure that you are using pruners and not actually just twisting the fruit off. This one actually got stuck between two branches, and so it kind of pinched the bottom half of this fruit. The other nice thing about icicles is a lot of times when we have these white fruit, they will start to brown a little bit once they are cut. But icicle tends to hold its true white color a little bit longer than some of the other varieties. So if you're looking for an eggplant to add in your garden, you might try Icicle. We are down here at the Wes Watkins Research and Extension Center in Lane, Oklahoma, and joining us today is Dr. Jim Shrefler. Dr. Shrefler, thank you for having us down here again today, and it looks like we're talking about
Glad
watermelon.
you could be here, yes. Yes.
One of our favorites in the summertime. So
Yes.
can you tell us all the keys to how to grow a good crop of watermelon?
Okay, yeah. And to start with, if you live in an area where you have the right environment and soils and things like that, that's the first starting point. It's very important.
So what are some of those soils?
And this soil here is called a fine sandy loam soil. Generally for watermelon, they will do best on some sort of a pretty sandy soil. A deep sand is actually maybe one of the better soils.
So good drainage.
And good drainage,
So
yes.
if you don't have deep sandy soil, maybe a raised bed, is that what we...
Sure, that would be good,
Okay.
you know. And you can grow watermelons. I don't want to discourage people. You can grow watermelons in a lot of good places. If you, again, a deep topsoil is important because they have a deep rooting
So when should we
system.
be thinking about starting our watermelon crop?
Okay, many people want to, well, they're anxious and want to get, you know, in the middle of April, end April, they say, well, past the flash freeze, I want to plant my watermelon.
Right, April 15th, we got to go out and plant, right?
And that's maybe okay for tomatoes, but watermelon's a very warm-natured crop, and really to get good seed germination, seedling development, plant establishment, you really need that soil to be warmer.
Okay.
So I kind of like to wait almost until the 1st of July, of June actually, to plant watermelon.
Okay, sort of like okra, right? Is that
kind of like okra? Yes,
Okay.
yeah, kind of like okra.
And when you're planting those, do you direct sow or do you start with transplants?
You can do it both ways. Again, for my recommendation for people that, unless you really need to use transplants, if you're growing seedless melons, for example, my recommendation is direct seed. You're going to have healthier plants. And again, if you wait until that soil's nice and warm, you'll put the seed in the ground and they'll be up within 4 or 5 days, and that plant will just take off growing if you keep it watered.
All right, well, it looks like your crop is doing pretty well here, and we're kind of shooting this ahead of time, so this is not, I know we're going to air it next May, but this is not May. I'm going to go ahead and say that.
Okay.
But yeah, we've got a good crop here, so you can expect that.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how much you've been growing watermelon out here at Lane.
Well, we've been here at this research station, and actually I'm the only horticulturist here now, but 20 years ago, or less than that, 15 years ago, there was a pretty good group of people, all of them involved somewhere or other with watermelon, because it's an important crop. And it's a good crop because it's a crop that'll be productive even in our these hot summers like we're having when the temperature's above 95 degrees every day. So,
well, yeah, we're midsummer right now, and tell us what how our watermelon are progressing.
Well, these watermelon vines are doing quite well, actually. We have some fruit that are probably about 3 weeks or so away from being ripe. Now, we've kind of been lucky here. I have not used any fungicides on this crop, and that is if you were really growing watermelons and wanted to protect them from the hazard of disease that will affect the foliage, and there's several, you would want to put a fungicide on there.
Okay.
Again, I didn't do it, haven't done it, and we've been lucky because these vines are very healthy. And in a year when you have pretty dry conditions.
As far as watering goes, I know watermelon like water, but they also like good drainage, as mentioned by the soil. So.
Right, and you might be able to see these are planted on somewhat of a raised bed, a little hill, and that's to improve the drainage. You know, if you do get even though it's a sandy soil, if you do get a real wet period, the plant's roots can get waterlogged, and that can set them back.
Right, and you have this on drip irrigation.
And we use drip irrigation, and that's just a very efficient way to be able to irrigate. You put the water right where it's needed for the plant to use it, and you're not watering the rest of the soil surface and encouraging new weed growth.
Right, So what are the big question, I guess, and it looks like we've got some watermelon that are coming on. When do you know they're ripe?
Well, one way to determine if they're ripe down in this area is watch when the wildlife start feeding on them. And sometimes it might be crows, it might be coyotes, it might be raccoons, it might be foxes.
So they're the best indicator.
They all seem to know pretty well when that fruit are ripe.
Okay. So that's also a problem, though.
That is a problem, yes, that is a problem.
So once you find out that they're signaling that they're ripe, what do you do about that?
Okay, there's, again, working with, for a commercial grower, they might want to put in some tall fences around their fields and various other things. It's a serious problem, though. But for a small planting in a home garden situation, something that we've found, and we've tried this several years now, is to just stretch some netting, bird netting, horticulture fabric could work, over the vines. When you know that the fruit are just about ripe, go ahead and cover them, and that keeps those animals away from them.
So they just don't want to climb underneath that netting to get in there.
They don't climb under it. They don't climb underneath it, no. And I haven't seen they've even tried to eat through the birds don't peck through the netting either. We haven't seen that so far, at least. So just an idea. It's something. So if you have some materials like this around, just don't throw them away. Keep them, and you can put them to use. You'll only have it on there for a couple weeks. Just put it on when those fruit are ready, and then remove it.
It seems like a really easy mechanical method that it would be a good deterrent for those pests.
Sure. Something easy to do.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing this, Dr. Shrefler. The word Harlequin means to be fancifully dressed or ornate, and it's no wonder that this bug that I want to introduce you to is called the Harlequin bug, because it is definitely ornate in its decoration. You can see that it's got an orange and black pattern to it, so don't confuse it with the ladybug, because this one is not a good insect to have in your garden. Unfortunately, this insect will overwinter in some of your plant debris, so this is one of the reasons why it's often good to go ahead and clean out your garden in the fall and get rid of that plant debris. So as you can see, the numbers of bugs that we have on our mustard greens here and also our pak choi behind us are increasing. In fact, they're kind of headed over towards our broccoli, our kale, and our Swiss chard. So we want to make sure we get some control on this. One of the things about the Harlequin bugs, it's almost as bad as the squash bugs as far as the numbers can get out of control so quickly. And that's because after 2 weeks after the Harlequin bugs begin to emerge out of that plant debris, you'll find that those females can start laying eggs already. So you might recognize those eggs because they have a uniform pattern where they create this double-barreled, and the eggs look like a barrel shape, but they're white and black striped, but they're in double rows typically. So you'll find those often on the underneath side of the leaves, so you'll want to be looking for those. Usually there's anywhere from 10 to 12 eggs in a kind of a cluster there. And so after 2 weeks of emerging, those females are going to start laying those eggs. And in the early spring, when the temperatures are cooler, those eggs will hatch within about 20 days. But as those temperatures warm up through the summer, those eggs can hatch within 5 days. So you can see how your numbers of bugs can really increase over that season. Now it does take a little while for those small larvae or nymphs to actually develop into a mature adult. However, you will get about 3 to 4 generations of Harlequin bugs each season. Now, we still want to treat these. I know our mustards are starting to age out now at this point, and then obviously our pak choi behind us, you can see, is starting to bolt, so it's kind of past its prime. You might think, I don't want to spray or do anything with this, I'm just going to rip them out. However, wild brassicas are the preferred choice. They will go after your warm season crops if they don't have anything else to eat. So you still want to make sure, even if you're taking these out, that you might be vigilant about watching them on your tomatoes, your okra, your squash, your corn. They will go after those warm season crops later in the season if they don't have anything else to eat. So how do we control these Harlequin bugs? Well, if you just have a few numbers, one of the things to do is to kind of look at your plants, and if you see a few of these, just go ahead and pick them off and destroy them somehow, get rid of them. And also make sure to be checking the underside of the leaf, again, for that double row of the black and white striped barrel eggs. And you can either smash those with your fingers. They're not very big, actually. They're very tiny, so you can kind of smash those with your fingers, or simply pull off that leaf and, again, dispose of that. Make sure you do destroy those eggs so that they don't actually hatch somewhere else and cause a problem later on. If you have larger numbers like we do, there's 2 options to spray. And so an organic option that you can use is something that has either neem oil or pyrethrins in it. Both of those are labeled an organic. The nice thing about using an organic spray is the fact that there is no pre-harvest interval date, and that is the number of days that you need to wait before applying this chemical until you can actually harvest your crop. So the PHI is known as 0, so you can apply this up till the time you are actually harvesting. Now, the one thing you want to be cautious of with neem oil, as the name implies, is it is an oil. So you want to make sure to spray this and apply this on your plants either early in the morning or later in the day, because putting an oil on your plants when the sun is at its brightest and hot can actually do some damage to the leaf itself. It's sort of like putting baby oil on your skin and then laying out in the sun. It can really affect those plants and cause them to burn. So be cautious if you're using neem oil in the heat of the day. You really want to do that early morning or in the evening. So that's one option, is to use neem oil or pyrethrins. Another more synthetic option is to use either carbaryl or malathion, and those are also options. Now they do have a pre-harvest interval that you want to be aware of. Again, depending on what crop you're applying it to, whether it's a mustard or your broccoli or your kale, you want to be aware of that as well. So you can see the damage that they do cause to your plants and why you want to treat these because of their piercing, sucking mouth parts. So what they actually do is stick their tiny little straw into these plants and basically help themselves to a kale smoothie by sucking out the plant juices out of there. And each time they pierce those plants, it's causing that damage onto that leaf, and that damage is what you really see. So either be looking for the bug itself, or if you start to see kind of this cloudy effect and this damage on your leaves, then that's a telltale sign that you might have the Harlequin bug. So be on the lookout and make sure to manage those before your numbers get out of control.
Next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we turn our attention to the prettier side of the landscape.
All right, everyone, cheers to spring.
To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Tulsa Garden Center at Woodward Park, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, Smart Pot, and the Tulsa Garden Club.